Hey guys, welcome to the King Closer Reacts. I am the King Closer, RJ Bass III. This is the series where I go through YouTube shorts, TikToks, Reels, all of that wholesaling advice that overwhelms you. And I give my take on whether or not I agree with it. And today, we're gonna have a specific topic about wholesaling gone wrong, the mistakes that wholesalers make, and see if I agree with these takes. Let's get into our first video.
This is the one thing you're not doing on your wholesale deal. A lot of people skip this process and it's calling your title rep and running a title report on each deal you tie up. So when you run the title, you'll be able to see any liens that's recorded against the property, how many owners is tied up to the property, and if they're in pre-foreclosure. You want to do that before you start any negotiation on price, because you're going to spin your wheels tying up the property and it can't close anyway. For more wholesale advice, follow Sold by Ty.
Okay, I don't like that take. I didn't quite know where she was going with it at first, because it seemed like she might be saying after you get it under contract, you open up title and you get a title commitment, which of course, each and every wholesale transaction should go through title. However, if you were to call each and every seller and then open title prior to negotiating price, I mean, one, you're going to burn bridges with title companies. Eventually, inevitably, title company is going to send you invoices for doing this. I don't really understand what her take was on this, and I adamantly disagree. I do not think that you need to be seeking out whether or not there's liens or if the property is in pre-foreclosure or anything like that. Also, the majority of our comping software has that information readily available for us. And the other thing is if you're going through the seller conversation using the closer's formula, you will find out a lot of that motivation with just open-ended questions. So I'm gonna hard pass on that take right there.
What to do if a seller backs out of a wholesaling deal at the last minute? You're going to go down to your local courthouse and file a memorandum of agreement in the Register of Deeds. This basically says that, hey, the seller and I have an agreement, it's under contract, so when the title search goes to do their thing, it's going to pull up there and cloud the title, so they're not able to sell it. And there are protections in place. Like and follow for more. What to do if a seller...
All right, so this is a hot topic. When and how and why should you file a memorandum of contract? Now, due to the regulations that are coming down across the real estate industry, I talked about this a couple of weeks ago in the Closer Reacts. The state of Texas is actually the first state that is coming down with regulations and really a law to protect sellers from improper usage of memorandums of contract. So now state of Texas is going to have in place where a seller can file or just sign an affidavit and it will remove the memorandum of contract. I get what he's talking about there, and listen, it happens to all of us, where a seller backs out at the last minute. Maybe another investor, another wholesaler comes along and offers more money, or the seller just gets cold feet and decides to back out. Yes, a memorandum is a tool that can be used in the majority of states to protect you and protect your interests, and I believe you should do that in the right scenario. However, I do not want wholesalers going around and filing memos on each and every single one of their properties. That's an improper usage of the tool. In fact, I have a TU member right now who has his second ever deal assigned and it can't close because another wholesaler who could not assign the deal has filed a memorandum on that property. And so now there's negotiations going back and forth between the TU member and another wholesaler that couldn't perform. That is the improper usage of this tool. So I like the take where it's like, hey, if the seller is backing out on you, you use this. Just make sure that you're doing it the correct way and for the right reasons.
What was your biggest failure when you started wholesale?
Trying to do everything at once. Naturally, when you start any business, you kind of wear every single hat. You start marketing, you're door knocking, you're cold calling crazy, and you get a deal under contract. And now you're like, I got to find the buyer, I got to do the title work, I got to do all this. I think you need to learn that stuff. So do the first 1 or 2 through. But if you can find someone, that transaction coordinator, or someone to help you with the disposition of the property, finding the buyer at the beginning, it allows you to go focus more time on getting the next deal. So easy to have the ebbs and flows in this business because you market, and then you focus on these 2 deals you have and you stop marketing. That one doesn't close. You have to catch all the way back up on the momentum that you had.
So I love this take, and I've talked about the roller coaster effect for wholesalers many times. I tell each and every person that comes into Titanium University, listen, on your first 10, 15, 20 deals, however many it needs to be, don't try to do dispositions. If you're brand new, you're already having to make decisions with lead generation. Acquisitions is already uncomfortable for you. You're probably making mistakes. You need to be developing skill sets. Comping and underwriting is probably an issue. Really determining where your end buyers are buying deals. And so then for you to take your focus away from lead generation and acquisitions to then move on to dispositions, which is a whole nother skill set, a whole nother conversation, and trying to do transaction coordination, it becomes very, very difficult. So here are a couple of things that I recommend. 1, use a third-party transaction coordinator like Easy REI Closings. We recommend them. If you have never heard about them, go to titaniumtc.com. There's about a 10-minute video between me and David Olds that you can watch and learn more about their company. Outside of that, when it comes to dispositions, I absolutely recommend doing a joint venture with another established wholesaler in that market, or join a community like Titanium University. I tell every person that comes in, hey, as soon as you get a deal, go into the Facebook group, do #Conquered, I got a deal in St. Louis, Missouri, and then I say, hey, here's the person that can do dispositions for you, or here's your end buyer. And from there, it keeps the people out of as much as possible that roller coaster effect, or like what this guy said, the ebbs and flows, so you can maintain that momentum inside of your business.
I stopped communicating with the seller. My escrow officer calls me and goes, Cody, I don't know how to tell you this, but the property closed 3 days ago. They sold it to somebody else. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, they can't sell it to anybody else. Got it under contract. The close was 3 weeks out.
People think that when they get it under contract, the calls are going to stop. The text messages are going to stop. Like, that's never going to go away.
Not only that, I'm like, that's impossible. So I called up the seller. I'm closing here in a day. Everything's lined up. They're like, well, I didn't hear from you. So I thought that the deal went sideways or something. So I sold it to somebody else.
You should be having a conversation with your seller after it's contracted of what are the next steps.
If you're wholesaling, you got to stay good friends in a good relationships.
Yeah, exactly. That's important to know. Once you get the deal under contract, it's your job to stay in contact with the seller, not only coach them what the next steps are, but checking in.
Yeah.
Do not rely on the title company at all.
So yeah, this is common, especially with wholesalers. We get so caught up in all of the things that we have to do that we forget about the most important person in this transaction, which is the seller. And why is this seller willing to sell this property to us for a discount? Well, it's because they have some underlying motivation going on in their life. And a lot of times there's a lot of different moving pieces going on that causes that motivation. Maybe there's debt collectors calling them, maybe they're moving, maybe they're worried about paying off some financial distressed element. Who knows what's going on? And if they don't hear from you, yeah, listen, they're desperate. They're motivated. Think about what that word is really describing them. They're going to go do whatever is necessary for them to get this property sold so they can solve their true problem. So yes, communication is key. Staying in front of the seller and letting them know, hey, this is what we're doing right now. This is where we are in the process. And this is also why it's vitally important to have someone inside of your organization, even if it's a third party, that is in charge of transaction coordination. Someone that is going to stay in that constant communication, even if it's just a friendly text message or an email that's sent and saying, here's what you can expect next, and this is the timeline. that communication is key, and that's what will eliminate you losing deals because the seller basically just panics.
It's being sold at the table, 100,000 less without even closing. And I was just saying that I should be able to get the amount that I would have gotten. And I'm asking for the buyer to pay the difference.
We justified our numbers based on our repairs and what we honestly think the property really needs to sell at the highest number. Do you normally go back to the buyer side to ask for commissions?
This normally doesn't happen because when you type that property in, it will come up that it's listed with the realtor. Even now, it's still listed.
No one tried to go around you, and in fact, she came to us.
It's being assigned for $34,000 at the table. I don't see where the problem is. I've had to file for a long time. I've done work, and it's just a lot of stuff that is not above board. There's been other people that have said or tried or whatever, but they're going to call me first. Just from an ethical standpoint.
What happened within the first couple of days, she just kind of ghosted. And then it wasn't until the last week and a half, we found out she had a realtor, and then she was under an agreement with, I guess, another family or whatever. And I guess that fell apart. The agreement that you signed, I'm sure, just ties you in with the seller paying your commissions. That would be between you guys.
Okay.
But I respect your position as a realtor and needing your commission on the seller side.
Oh man, that's messy right there. So I'm trying to catch you guys up on my take on this. This is kind of just an impromptu conversation, but it appears that this was a listing agent or a previous listing agent calling in and asking this gentleman to pay her commission. I agree with his standpoint on this. Whatever he's willing to offer on the property, and it sounds like this realtor's upset because he's assigning it for $34,000, which, hey, kudos to him. He did a good job. She's like, hey, I want to get paid. But the listing agreement that she had was with those sellers, and the sellers agreed to pay a certain commission. Now, whether or not that listing agreement had expired, however many days it was, that could be a real messy transaction. One of the things I will say to all of the wholesalers watching this, if you are targeting expired listings, okay, if that's a list that you're pulling, or even if it's an inbound lead and they say, hey, my listing just expired, I would briefly ask the sellers, what was in the listing agreement that you signed? What happens if the property sells 60 or 90 days after that listing agreement expired? Because a lot of times realtors have protection in there. Now, normally the protection is that if the buyer came from the marketing efforts of that realtor, then they're owed a commission. I don't know if that's the case here, but I would at least ask the seller to explain what the listing agreement was, or even have them send it to you. We've done that many times, so we can look over it to make sure that we're not doing anything unethical to the previous listing agent.
I tell investors all the time to stop getting deals first before getting your buyers. You're doing this whole thing backwards. That's why your wholesalers are so small. That's why you contract 6 and close 2. That's just nonsense. When I hear that from wholesalers, I'm like, hey, what do you do with the other 4? You're lying to these people. Build your buyers list first. Understand exactly where your buyers want to be, what they want to buy, what they're looking for, and only contract what your buyers want. It's a guaranteed deal, and your wholesale profits go through the roof because you understand what numbers you need to be at. Stop making this hard. Stop doing it backwards.
Shout out to The Road Less Stupid, the book that he's reading there at the beginning of the short there. That was actually one of the books that we read in Titanium University's book club. It was one of my favorite ones. Now, as far as the take goes here, a little bit old school thought process on like build the buyers list. Now, listen, I understand what he's trying to accomplish and what he's trying to say. I just think that, we're undermining the technology that exists. I had this take a couple of weeks ago with Max Maxwell, where he was like, hey, you got to build that buyer's list. We don't have to do that nowadays. Now, going to his specific take, he uses great language there. He says, why not go get deals knowing where your in buyers buy? Where in buyers buy? WEBB. The web. We should have a formula called that, like the web formula. and we could just look at all the data that exists and see exactly where the end buyers buy and know who those buyers are. And if we were to do that, we wouldn't have to have a list. We could just literally do it all across the country. Oh, that's what we do here at Titanium Investments. We utilize the technology that exists. We are able to look at the comps. We can see exactly where the end buyers buy. We know who they are. So once we contract it, we don't need to ask them if they would be willing to buy it. We already know that they want to buy it. So we don't need the buyers list because we've advanced past where we were in 2018 and 2019 when we had to have a MailChimp or a Constant Contact. And then we had to go and ask them, hey, Jordan Cash Buyer, which buy box? You want those 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,200 to 1,700 square foot houses with nothing more than $50,000 in work, and you don't go above an ARV of 400,000, and then write that down somewhere in your MailChimp or Constant Contact acting like we were revolutionizing the world? We weren't. What actually revolutionized the world is that the fact that now there's technology that tells us what that buy box is. We actually know it up front, and then we can send that to them. We don't even have to send it to them in an email. We can send it to them in a text message, or we can just call them and we send them a link and we say, we got you another property just like the one you bought on this specific date and you sold on this specific date. That is what we should be doing as virtual wholesalers. So to a certain degree, I agree with this man's take. I've never seen him before. Love his accent. But buyers list, listen, I'm anti-buyers list almost as much as I am that old fake underwriter, which didn't show his ugly face in today's episode of The King Closer Reacts, just like Zach Ginn didn't show up. Holy cow. What a hell of an episode. I'm going to have a great weekend. Hope you guys are going to have a great weekend. Let me know what you thought about today's King Closer Reacts. Leave me a comment. I appreciate each and every one of them. And we'll see you guys next week.